Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball. He dribbles through traffic, gets to the basket, and throws it down.
Out of bounds, Detroit basketball!
Pistons fans, welcome back to the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me this week are both Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, how are we feeling with Detroit up 2-0?
Well, how am I feeling? I'm sick right now, so you can probably hear it in my voice, but that's how I'm feeling personally. But overall, the Pistons being up 2-0, couldn't ask for a better start to the series for Detroit. The absolute 180 that it has felt like compared to the series against Orlando and how the Pistons are playing, how they're succeeding. It's been, really interesting. I think it lends even more credit to the Orlando Magic for the fight that they put up against Detroit. And I mean, again, to be up 2-0, this is a great spot for the Pistons to be in. They still got to go on the road. And, I know the whole credence of a series doesn't start until a team wins on the road, and we'll see if Detroit can do that over these next few games as they head out to Cleveland for Game 3 and Game 4.
I'm feeling a little under the weather myself, but I think that's because I was watching James Harden highlights against the Pistons before we logged on here. It's got me feeling a little queasy, Mike. I'm sure there's a lot of people in Cleveland that feel way worse than Aaron does right now. Yeah, I was waiting for it. You're just lucky our friend Tim Forkin isn't on the podcast, because we'd have to put this one as age inappropriate.
And at this rate, he never will be on the pod.
You shouldn't be asking us, Mike, how we're feeling. Like, we need to ask you how you're feeling. I felt like last night maybe like a wellness check was needed. Are you okay? I mean, I'm sure, our listeners, those that have been watching or listening for an extended period of time, they know your loyalty to the Cavs and are probably eager to hear what you have to say after Cleveland starts this series with an 0-2 start.
Forget Mike. Kenny Atkinson's been in a coma for 2 games, guys. We need to send a doctor to him.
For longer than that. It's been longer than that. Well, thanks for checking up on me. This sounds like it's about to be an intervention pod, which we've had many of those, but they've normally been for like poor draft picks or Monty Williams lineup decisions. So it's a nice change of pace, that one for me instead. We'll get into it. We'll get into all of the trials and tribulations of the Cavs, but we're going to try to gear it towards what Detroit's doing well, because something that the national media isn't doing is saying what a good job Detroit is doing defensively and offensively, taking what the Cavs are giving them, which is a lot. It's mostly been how bad James Harden has been, how underwhelming Evan Mobley has been, how dumb the front office is for trading Darius Garland, and it's not about how well Detroit's playing. So we'll try to keep it on both sides. Game 3 is tomorrow night for those of you who are listening. Or is it? Taking 2 days off?
Saturday afternoon.
It's Saturday afternoon.
3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
So it's today for those of you who are listening. We get the NBA TV schedule. The Pistons are 4.5-point underdogs, which is, as Aaron pointed out pre-pod, it's the first time that the Pistons are underdogs, period, in the playoffs. And that 4.5 points is, of course, brought to us by our loyal sponsor, FanDuel. So should I go first? Since
Mike,
Cavalier land.
This is kind of like the last stand for Cleveland. So I think it makes sense that you go first. I mean, if Cleveland goes down 3-0 and they lose that third game at home, it's pretty much lights out for them. So this is where the Cavs have to make their final stand. So lead us off. I mean, how do you feel about this?
Poor. I don't feel particularly good about anything that could have happened, because despite being up 2-0, Kate Cunningham said there's a fine line, and the Cavs were tied or leading in the fourth quarter of both games. They fell apart after that. Or maybe the second half. I don't know if they were leading in the fourth quarter of yesterday's game. Oh, no, they were. Because friend of the pod, Dylan, said, hey, look, they didn't have a lead. And then about 3 minutes later, they had the lead. So tied or leading in the fourth quarter on the road. They have not won on the road. They actually got pretty well beaten down by Toronto, either mentally or physically, in every road game. And they won every home game against the Raptors, some of them pretty resoundingly, others not so much. So they are a better team at home. I think that's why the Cavs are favorites at home. That's the only thing I could possibly think of, because there's nothing that we could have gleaned from those first two games that would make you believe that the Cavs should be favored in the series at all. You're right. This is the last stand. This is it. This is the last stand for a lot of things. This crop of players for Cleveland, this is like it for them. They're going to have to make changes, whether they won the finals or not. This is a team that's expensive and just got older. So this is it. Aaron, you are not wrong. This is the last stand.
Yeah, I mean, this is, in my opinion, where the Cavs have to pull out all the stops. Donovan Mitchell can't play sub 40 minutes anymore. You're down 2-0. Your best player needs to be on the court more. It maybe means James Harden needs to play a little bit less. I mean, I think some of the guys that Cleveland has, someone like a Jalen Tyson and the way he can disrupt the game defensively, I think, there are some realities that are setting in for Cleveland where it's you can't trust James Harden to be, the James Harden that once was. And James Harden in the playoffs has historically been an underachiever, but it's brutal right now. And so for Cleveland, they need Evan Mobley to play and to step up and be able to be on the court for more than 36 minutes. I mean, the Pistons are winning these games, and Kate played 42 minutes on Thursday night. If you're trying to win a game, your guys got to play in the playoffs. And so I think Kenny Atkinson has kind of been a little laissez-faire in terms of his rotation, and it's burned the Cavs in this series. So I expect them to pull out all the stops. You're going home. There is the pressure and the urgency of being down 2-0 in a series like this does set up that if there is a game that Cleveland's going to win in this series, it's going to be game 3, because this is really where, the buck has to stop for them. They have to get a win, and it's going to take, some serious changes to how they've played. So not necessarily surprised to see this line. Cleveland is still a good team. This is not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. And the Pistons are not playing incredibly great basketball either in this series. So it's not like the Pistons are just playing untouchable basketball right now. So yeah, the line makes sense. If Cleveland's gonna win a game right now, it's got to be game 3, because if they don't come out urgent, this is gonna end in 4.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I want to get to the games themselves. But I'm pretty much on board with you there, Aaron. If they're going to win a game this series, and I have to believe they are going to win at least a game in this series, they just have too much talent not to. The Pistons, as good as they are, do have weaknesses. They do have exploitable weaknesses. We've seen that against Orlando. Perhaps Cleveland can't exploit those weaknesses in the same way as Orlando, but they do have talent, and, they have had some positives, not a lot, but some. And when I look at this, I just think they have to win a game. This feels about right, though. I see Cleveland winning game 3 by 5 points. That sounds about right to me. And if they don't, this series is over, guys. We're coming on to next week's podcast, and we're talking about the preview with the Knicks if they don't win game 3 at minimum. And to be honest, we still might be coming on this podcast next week and talking about a preview against the New York Knicks, even if they do win game 3, because you said it. We definitely have to talk about all the things the Pistons have done right, but I think this series so far has been more of an indictment on Cleveland than it has with Detroit playing exceptionally well. I've seen some people, I've heard some people say, Detroit's played as well as they could in these first 2 games, and I just completely disagree. The way I've looked at these first 2 games, it's Detroit looks like they are playing regular season basketball right now. That's what it looks like. And Cleveland, I don't know what the hell they're doing. I have no idea what they're doing. So, yeah, I think this is the right line. I think I would pick Cleveland as an emotional hedge. But if I'm being completely honest, based on the basketball that I have seen and based on like the underlying aspects of this series, this is more of an emotional hedge for me than anything else, to be honest with you. I haven't seen anything from Cleveland that makes me go, they're winning more than one game in this series.
No. I mean, pretty shortly. I mean, you guys asked in the group chat for some level of analysis for how the Pistons could play and beat Cleveland. And by the way, these were close games in the regular season. I think it was 2-2 was the split, and one of those was without Harden and Mitchell in one of the games.
The first matchup they had in the season, the Cavs blew out the Pistons. Cade had a terrible game. The second time they matched up was kind of like how these games have played out, where it was like the Pistons were like, they were fine, they were okay, but like you really saw them physically overpower Cleveland. And then after the trade deadline, they split those other two games. One was without Harden and Mitchell. One, I believe, was just without Harden. Like, I don't think they saw Harden at all in the regular season. And perhaps if they had, we would have been going into this series looking at it with a little bit more confidence. Because, to be honest, I said it online, like, I had very little feel for this series going into it. I felt like, I need to see what the Pistons look like in game one, and then I'll be able to tell you how the rest of the series plays out, in my opinion. And I feel like I have a pretty good idea now.
Yeah, I don't think the Cavs had a good feel for the series either, just based off of everything that they've shown us. So I guess we'll talk about the games now.
You sure you want to do that, Mike?
I do, because look, I've written a lot about the Cavs this year for my other basketball role, which is with Fear the Sword. So I have a little bit more of a ear to the ground on some of the things that happen with the Cavs and have happened. So this is like my wheelhouse. I'm like the most marketable person right now covering the two teams in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Game one, 111-101. Two teams that you can kind of tell were getting out of both playing game sevens like 2 days earlier. It was pretty sloppy. It was kind of a rock fight at times. The Pistons comfortably, I think, had control of most of the game. Got tied up at 73 at the some point early in the fourth quarter, 73 or 75. And then at that point was pretty much a Kenny Atkinson disaster class when he did not sub in Mobley or Donovan Mitchell, and JD Bickerstaff put Cade back in the game, and him and Duren just punched a couple of pick and rolls. Duren had a block. Finito. So game one, guys, any thoughts on game one? I know we were kind of blending a little bit, having two games played already, but any thoughts from that first game you had logged?
I mean, I really think it's kind of the same story for both games, in my opinion. Like
They're very similar games.
The Pistons have just kind of looked like the team that's been in control the whole way. And really, when I think back to game one, the thing that stands out to me is when it mattered most, and we look at two polarizing young big men in this league that have been critiqued heavily at times. Jalen Duren physically dominated Evan Mobley in the final minutes of that game, taking him into the paint, beating him in the paint. And that was, to me, the thing that stood out the most. And these are two guys that I think you might be able to say are the X factor for their teams in this series, right? Like, you know that Cleveland is going to get a lot out of Donovan Mitchell. We know that the Pistons are going to get a lot out of Cade Cunningham. But who's going to be that second guy? And Evan Mobley was very good in the regular season, and he had some really great performances in the regular season. The same can be said for Jalen Duren. But in the final moments of game one, when these two teams needed their guys to step up, on Detroit's end, Jalen Duren stood up, and in the process, he sat down Evan Mobley. And that's what I can really stands out for me in game one, when both of these two games have been relatively similar. That's what I can recall the most from game one.
Definitely, Aaron. I think for me, it was so hard for me after game one not to go like, I think this might be a sweep, because you saw the difference in just the process for both of these teams. And this has remained true for game 2 as well. These teams, everything you see for Cleveland is so hard, so difficult. They are taking so many difficult shots. They are trying to hunt Duncan Robinson. Boy, we got to talk about Duncan Robinson a little bit. He has looked like a totally different player than the Orlando series. Last night, and by the way, we are talking about 2 games here. I've been trying to do our post-game show. If you are somebody that's looking for instant reaction to the games right afterwards, I'm trying to put those out. Aaron has done one as well. We'll see if he can do another one on Saturday. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I said it last night. Duncan Robinson looks like free. He looks like a bird released from its cage. And he's not even noticing these defenders. It's not like every shot he's taken has been wide open, but you saw a couple times last night, like Max Strus is just jumping right at him, and Duncan just throws it up and makes it like he's not even there. You can really see like the night and day for him on that end of the floor. But on the defensive end of things, every time, and this is exactly what the Cavs have tried to do in both these games, like it was the first thing they did in game 2 was they were like, we are going at Duncan Robinson for the first 5 possessions of this game. And it worked for them on the very first play because him and Tobias Harris got mixed up. Dean Wade got an open 3. But in both of these games, you've seen a level of fight from Duncan Robinson and a connectiveness of the defense as a whole. They are playing unbelievable help defense right now. And it's everybody chipping in. It's like, okay, maybe they don't get the switch on Duncan Robinson. James Harden's going against Cade one-on-one. Strip, steal, easy bucket. It's happened in both games in the fourth quarter where James Harden has coughed up the ball in the fourth quarter and the Pistons have gone on to get the back-breaking bucket. And like, when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing the job that Duncan Robinson is doing versus on the other end of the floor when the Pistons are hunting Donovan Mitchell, when they're hunting James Harden, when Tobias Harris is on the baseline and he's like just looking for the matchup so that he can do his patented post-up fadeaway. It's night and day. Like the level of fight, the level of effort, and even if Duncan Robinson does get beat on some of these plays, he's doing enough with his hedging. He's doing enough with his fighting. He's doing enough with his body to at least allow the Pistons help defenders to get over and take away those advantages for Cleveland. You're not seeing any of that on the other end. And it's exactly like you said, Aaron, the process, the ease in which Detroit was able to put that game away. If you're just looking at the box score, which I think a lot of people did, you say, well, Detroit got to the line a whole lot more. Cleveland threw away the ball a bunch of times. A lot of those were unforced turnovers. But what happened in game 2? Cleveland, only 2 more turnovers than Detroit. 13 turnovers to 11. Not crazy. They went to the line 7, 8 more times than Detroit did. Guess what happened? They still lost by 10. They scored 4 fewer points in game 2 than they scored in game 1, while largely holding on to the rock, while largely going to the free throw line and getting the calls in their favor. Like, I'm not seeing anything right now through 2 games that is making me think that this Cleveland team can physically contend with what you have. And when you bring in the other intangibles into it, it's the 2 games. It's like JP Bickerstaff has outcoached Kenny Atkinson through 2 games. We do have to talk about like the vast difference in that matchup. I said it 2 minutes, 3 minutes into game 2. I was like, did Kenny Atkinson like skip film session? Did he watch the first game? They allowed Asar Thompson when so what they did in both these games, they start out sticking Evan Mobley on Asar Thompson. They go, Asar's not a threat to shoot. We're going to leave him open. We're going to have Mobley come in and help whenever the Pistons try and run pick and roll. They're basically trying to do what Orlando did against you in the first round. But in this series, when Asar Thompson is getting the ball and he's cutting to the baseline, there is nobody in front of him. And you saw that in game 1, and I said, look, he might be tempted to do that in game 2, but I don't think that's going to work. You have to switch that up because it's so easy for Ausar to get into the lane, to get to the rim, to pass it out, to get an offensive board. There's just nobody putting a body on him. And in game 2, Kenny Atkinson doubles down on that. You saw Ausar Thompson get 8 of the easiest points he's going to get all season long in the first quarter of game 2. And I see that, and I go to myself, wow, I mean, I just think that the difference in coaching, the difference in preparedness, it's so hard for me to see Cleveland winning these things. I don't see where they can create matchups for Detroit that Detroit doesn't have answers to. And right now I'm seeing in both these games, Detroit having the answers to whatever adjustment Cleveland makes, and Cleveland's not able to respond to those adjustments themselves. So it's night and day from that Orlando series so far.
Yeah, I think, for me, watching a 48-minute game, it's very clear that Cleveland does not have the buy-in to meet what Detroit does physically for 48 minutes. I mean, there was the clip going around from game 2 of late in the game, James Harden maybe it was Donovan Mitchell.
The Mitchell Dean Wade mix up, right?
Yes, refuses to go through the screen, fight through the screen, leaves Detroit wide open, and Dean Wade just kind of shakes his head like, are we serious? And this is your star player. And then on the flip side, you go back and Cade Cunningham's defending James Harden, and he's poking the ball away, and he's diving on the floor, and he's passing it up the court, and the Pistons get a breakaway dunk. And for me, that is something that stands out in this matchup. Even the best players on Detroit's side are going to give that for 48 minutes, and they will defend for 48 minutes, and they will do the things that maybe most superstars in the league or better players in the league are not asked to do or are given the leeway to not do. And we see it with James Harden. We see it with Donovan Mitchell. These guys are not willing to play the way that Detroit is for 48 minutes. And when I see that, it just makes me believe that Cleveland does not have what it takes to beat Detroit in a 7-game series. As long as this series goes, it's just going to get harder for Cleveland, because if in game 1 and game 2 you're not showing that buy-in, are you going to have it by game 6 or game 7 when you're even more physically worn down, especially after just playing a first-round 7-game series? For me, I can believe that the Pistons will have that juice and will have that intensity, because they might have a game 3 or a game 4 where they just can't hit the broadside of a barn, to quote Dwayne Casey. And if that happens, they could drop a game. But I know that they're not going to drop a game because they were unwilling to compete for 48 minutes. And, not to just pounce on Cleveland here, but that's kind of what it looks like from Cleveland's POV. They're not willing to go at the same level of intensity for 48 minutes that Detroit's willing to. And that's why the Pistons are up 2-0. I mean, yeah, the Pistons shot 50% from 3 in game 2, and I don't think that's going to probably happen again the rest of this series. But even so, the Pistons played far from a clean game. Cade Cunningham was very much held in check up until the fourth quarter, when he decided to explode and dominate and put the Cavs away. You had Ausar Thompson in foul trouble. He only played 24 minutes. It was another game where Jalen Duren, quite frankly, underperformed, was not impressive, did not meet the standard for what a player of his capability it should be doing. And it was another game where, there were plenty of things that went wrong for Detroit. Isaiah Stewart, 5 fouls in 11 minutes, a complete negative factor again. And this is a guy that was crucial to Detroit's regular season success. So all those things go wrong for Detroit, and they're still able to win a playoff game by double digits. There's a lot of bad omens in the air on Cleveland's side. And I'm not saying the series is over, because, people wrote the Pistons off after how the series started against Orlando in the first round. But this Cleveland team does not look like they have that same sort of juice that Detroit had when they went down in round 1.
But Aaron, here's the thing that I'm going to say about hey, you just came back from a 3-1 lead. You can't, you can't rest on your laurels. But we saw in game 2, the Pistons dominate not even a half, really. They dominated a quarter of basketball, and they put away Orlando. Even if in game 1, first half of game 2, game 3, game 4, they looked largely bad, there was at least a point where you looked at them and you say, okay, wait a second. They can do the things that have brought them to this point so far, right? Like, they are just simply not rebounding to the level they can. They are simply not being tough to the level they can. They are not turning over Orlando to the level they can that we've seen in the regular season, right? So you felt like, okay, yes, they're down 3-1, but if they rediscover the things that got them here, and we've seen them do that at least for a point in this series, so we know they can do it to this team, they still can come back from this. Have you seen anything from Cleveland that reminds you of that third quarter against Orlando where you go, oh, okay, yeah, we've dominated most of it up until this point, but here is how they get back into this series. There is a blueprint for them. There are certain actions, like right now I look at it and it's the difference between a good team and a great team. Detroit is a great team. Cleveland is a good team. But the difference is all those intangible things. And like, I don't see anything from Cleveland through 2 games that makes me think they're going to make up the rebounding margin. There's nothing that makes me think they're going to make up the turnover margin. There's nothing that makes me think James Harden is going to stop looking like a geriatric. And like the things that they have done, like we saw Donovan Mitchell get hot last game. What did it matter? It didn't. It didn't matter that Donovan Mitchell took over the third quarter. We saw James Harden score 9 straight points at the beginning of the fourth quarter of game 1. What did it matter? It didn't matter. And like when I see that versus what I saw from Detroit in round 1, there was a possibility for a fight back. I see no fight in this Cleveland team. Like Detroit went down 3-1 and they were still talking about this is what we have to do better. I saw Cleveland go down 1 game in this series, and they're immediately complaining about the refs, about how they should be flopping more. That to me is not a team that is ready for this. Period.
It's big loser energy.
It is,
and this is not something new. They've had big loser energy the last 3 years when they barely scraped by Orlando with JB. 2 years ago now? Last year against the Pacers, they get pantsed after being the best team in the conference the entire year. And now this year, they trade away Darius Garland and make a huge splash. It paid off in the regular season. They were the number 1 offense after acquiring James Harden in the regular season. I mean, the numbers speak to that. And then once again, they faced a little bit of adversity. I really didn't think that they would win Game 7 against the Raptors. I really didn't. That felt like such a game that they would just roll over. But they didn't. They just don't have the fight. Like if you flipped Detroit and Cleveland in that 3-1 position against Orlando, that's not a team that I feel confident in being able to pick themselves up off the mat. This is a continuous problem. It's not a Kenny Atkinson problem because they did this under JB and they're doing it now. Kenny's not coached well, but this is like a institutional aura of just not really wanting to care enough to try when it matters most. And you're seeing it in real time now that they get down, they have a spurt of, like you said, 9 points from James Harden. They can't sustain that. That is literally an injection, and that's it. They're out. They go back to whatever poor play that they had. I mean, even after they tied up the game and Kenny Atkinson didn't put Mobley and Mitchell back in, he takes a timeout, 90 seconds later because they're down after 2 straight buckets from Duren. The ATO is a Mobley pull-up 3. What are we doing? What on earth? What level of seriousness does everybody have about getting back into the series? And there just isn't any right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mike, here is how this has gone for Cleveland. Again, like I said, like Detroit destroyed Orlando in the second quarter of game 2. Here's what the Cavs have done. They've lost 5 of the 8 quarters so far. And the quarters they've won were the second quarter of game 1 by 3 points, the third quarter of game 1 by 6 points, and the third quarter of game 2 by 7 points. The Pistons in the first and fourth quarters of this series have outscored Cleveland by 32 points. So, like, you have one team that is coming out at the beginning of these games, stamping their mark on it, making the other team react, and then at the fourth quarter, they're able to go, okay, we just need to turn it back up again. We can allow Cleveland to win a quarter by 5-6 points because it doesn't matter at the end of the game. If it's close, we have the guy, and Detroit has the versatility. This is why I said after the Cavs traded for Harden, I was less worried about them in the playoffs post-Harden trade than with Darius Garland, because James Harden is like this Cavs team, Mike, I'm sure you're at this point kind of right now. You can't turn a hoe into a housewife, guys. You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. James Harden, he's not learning to cook at 36 years old. He's not interested in being a stay-at-home mom at 36 years old. He is what he is. They are going to play Harden ball, and he's not going to change. With Darius Garland, at least you had a level of versatility, right? You could say, okay, you know, they're really honed in on Garland. He doesn't have the size for this. Fine, we'll stick him off ball. We'll play him as a shooter. You're not doing that with James Harden. He has to have the ball in his hands. So now you're at a point, if you're Cleveland, where I think you genuinely have to start thinking, like, do we play James Harden 20 minutes a game? And
they need to play him off ball.
But you can't. He's James, but they can't. Like, if you're going to do that, you might as well play Dennis Schroeder.
Okay. I'd rather play Craig Porter Jr., honestly. He's got a little bit of size and some juice.
And then there's also the additional issue of the fact that James Harden has a player option for next year. He's got a player option. And I don't know about you guys, but I think he's going to be picking that one up, fellas. So, like, you have now a longer-term issue with James Harden also. I just don't know what the hell the Cavaliers are going to do.
Evan Mobley will love Milwaukee. That's what's going to happen. They're going to send Mobley 2 picks and 2 swaps for Giannis. We're going to have a great big circus from hell, and who knows after that?
You know who's got to be feeling great is JB Bickerstaff right now, man. He is just looking at this. He's going, I told you.
I'm very
I told you it wasn't me.
When I did the solo pod for Palace of Pistons, when they hired JB, I mean, I was very adamant that this was a good coaching hire for the Pistons. He was the scapegoat here in Cleveland when clearly it was not his fault. The inability to get off the mat, the inability to win in tight moments, the offense not looking good when it mattered most in clutch time, that's all still happening right now. This is like a player personnel type of problem. And, you know, if you really want to get crazy, I don't know if the Cavs should be looking at giving Mitchell a max extension. I don't know how you look at any of the playoff success or lack thereof that he's had in Cleveland since he was traded here and think that is a max player. Give him a max contract. They are it's a bad situation. This is not a Cavs podcast.
Aaron, Mike's about to start spiraling.
Let's wind it back a little bit because it almost feels like we're talking about this season being over for the Cleveland Cavaliers. We still got a series going on. And one question I wanted to pose, and I'm actually, because I feel like I haven't talked in a few minutes, I'm going to lead off with my own answers here. But I wanted to ask you guys, because we get great perspective, right, from the Pistons POV, Jasper and I, Mike with his Cavs POV. If there's one rotation change that you want to see from either side, or you think either side should be making, you know, what would that look like? For me, and this was something that unfortunately, you know, I missed last week's podcast, and we didn't really do necessarily like a preview pod for this Cleveland series. But for me, looking at how the minutes were distributed in round one for Cleveland, I was looking at it like Jalen Tyson should play a heck of a lot more in this series than he did in round one for Cleveland, because he has presented one of the more challenging matchups in terms of defending Cade Cunningham that I have seen all season. I mean, this dates back to the regular season when the Pistons and Cavs matched up. And Jalen Tyson immediately stood out to me as a guy that, out of all the defenders, all the high-level defenders that get thrown at Cade Cunningham from game one to, you know, game 82, Jalen Tyson stood out in the upper echelon of guys that did a very, very good job defending Cade Cunningham. And when I saw in round one that he was playing 14, 18 minutes a game, I just thought, man, if I'm Cleveland, that's changing in round two because, and I think we saw it in game 2 last night, Cade was pretty much held in check offensively for the first 3 quarters, not in the sense of, Cade was trying to get his own bucket and Tyson was just locking him up and Cade was inefficient. That wasn't the case. Cade was just not having the greatest time getting open. And it was really Jalen Tyson staying locked on him, holding him, grabbing him, running with him. And it turned Cade into more of a prober, distributor. And then in the fourth quarter, Jalen Tyson comes out of the game after holding Cade in line, and it ends up where it's Dean Wade for a possession here or there, turns into James Harden being the primary defender on Cade Cunningham here and there. And it's like, what are you doing? You had the recipe in front of you, and you threw it in the trash. Why would you take Jalen Tyson out of the game? And that was bonkers to me. I mean, Max Strus plays 28 minutes. He shoots 1 of 6 from the floor and is not a good defender. Why is Jalen Tyson not playing more than Max Strus? Why are you not figuring out more ways to get him into the game? He is very clearly a big piece for this series. Maybe he's not great in every series, but he can be really effective in this series. And the way he was defending Cade Cunningham for the first 3 quarters of that game was very impressive. And I'm floored that Cleveland has not adjusted to playing him more. From Detroit's point of view now, I think the very clear switch, the very clear opportunity is giving Paul Reed a look. And this is not something that I say lightly. I think Isaiah Stewart in the regular season was very, very good for Detroit. He has made a huge impact on this franchise, but he's hurting you right now. And Paul Reed can give you something offensively that maybe Detroit needs right now. Just how he finds himself in on every play. He finds himself on the glass. Something that Isaiah Stewart has not done a good job of in this series is rebounding. And we know how important rebounding is for the Detroit Pistons on either side of the court. When they don't rebound, they lose. And when Isaiah Stewart's not rebounding, how valuable is he? If he's not going to shoot for you offensively, he's not rebounding for you on either end, I think you got to give a look to Paul Reed. And I think you got to start doing it in game 3. I know you're up 2-0, but that doesn't mean you can sit back, be laissez-faire, and not make any adjustments until you drop a game or two. You need to make sure you keep your foot on the throat and stomp on it. And I think part of that is at least giving Paul Reed a look. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But they did it in the Orlando series. They had a productive set of minutes, and then they kind of spreaded them in a little bit more throughout the rest of the series. And the results were more positive than negative. So for me, Jalen Tyson's got to play more for Cleveland, and Paul Reed needs to get a look for Detroit.
Aaron, through 27 minutes of game 1 and 2, Isaiah Stewart has scored 8 points. He has 5 rebounds, and he has 0 blocks. 0 blocks. So I think we are in total agreement, actually, on both of these players. I am with you. I think Paul Reed should be getting some minutes. I actually think pretty much you're seeing, like, whenever Cleveland has looked somewhat okay, it's been when Isaiah Stewart's been on the floor for the most part. And we can talk about Jalen Duren's lack of scoring, especially last night. Like, the finishing was just like awful for Jalen Duren at the rim. It was so bad. And I think there's things they can do to fix that. But like, Jalen Duren, though, has controlled the boards. He had 7 offensive rebounds in game 1. Jalen Duren has played very good defense. I think, Jarrett Allen played a lot better last night, but the things that Duren has done other than score, I think, have been very impactful on how both of these games have played out. And look, he drew 3 fouls on Jarrett Allen in game 1. Jarrett Allen was the best player for Cleveland. He only played 6 minutes in the opening half. And perhaps that game goes a little differently if they get 30 minutes out of Jarrett Allen in game 1. I don't know. I don't think so, but we'll never find out. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. Paul Reed, look, he's also just like offensively a little bit better of a matchup in this one because he can space the floor a little bit. Like, I do think The one thing Mobley did well last night was defend at the rim, I felt like.
That's what I was gonna say. Paul Reed especially makes sense when Evan Mobley's in at the 5 for Cleveland. Especially there.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, we're in total agreement on this.
There's synthesis going on. I mean,
I love it. And I said the same thing about Jalen Tyson. I was like, I think Jalen Tyson needs to be the guy they start. You could make an argument for Strus if you want to really be like, hey, we need to go in all in on the offense. I think that would have been the wrong decision. But Dean Wade was the only objectively incorrect choice for that 5th starting spot. He doesn't shoot well enough. He doesn't shoot as well as Strus, and he can't defend as well as Tyson. So it's a half measure. You can't take half measures against this Detroit Pistons team. You cannot just be like, we'll see how this plays out. No, you need to commit to a style of play and stick to it, because Detroit is going to do that. And if they find a weakness in you, they are going to just exploit it over and over and over again. And Dean Wade is a weakness for Cleveland. Jalen Tyson, I agree with you, Aaron. He is one of like 3 or 4 guys that when I see him out there, I'm like, this might be a little tough for Cade. He's like Andrew Nemhard is the same way. You know what I mean? Or sorry, Aaron Nesmith, excuse me. It's the same thing where you go up against him, you go, look, maybe he's not the best defender in the NBA, but for Cade specifically, he has enough strength, he has enough quickness, he has enough length to where Cade can't necessarily exploit one of those areas for him. So yes, I totally agree. I thought it was like, again, I saw the starting lineup for Cleveland and I said, Kenny Atkinson can't be serious on this. Like, you can't be serious starting Dean Wade. Like, you're capitulating already. You've already said, I don't think we can win this game playing a particular style of basketball. Like, we're going to try to adapt to what Detroit does. So yeah, total agreement with you on that one. Especially in regards to, like, I think what Paul Reed can give you. No, perhaps he's not going to give you. He's going to give you 80% of what a healthy Isaiah Stewart does at the defensive end of the floor. But Isaiah Stewart, to me, is clearly not healthy. And offensively, what he can do, I think, is far more useful for you in this series right now. So, yes, I'm with you on that one, Aaron. That being said, one guy I'm really happy to see make his way back into the rotation is Ron Holland.
Yeah, Ron Holland was actually the pick that I had for more minutes because I think this is a very good Ron Holland series, much better than Orlando. I mean, it was pretty much recognized very quickly that Magic series was not the series for Ron Holland. I think he can make an impact against the Cavs, and he already has. He's already made things happen when he's been on the court. I do agree about Isaiah Stewart. That little point has been made a few times that the Cavs have gone on runs when Isaiah Stewart was on the floor, and it's unfortunate because he is a fan favorite. But he just has not been super effective. There's maybe some rumblings that he's dealing with perhaps a calf injury. Somebody on one of the Cavs local podcasts had also mentioned that they thought Stewart was dealing with an injury. And if that's the case, it makes a whole lot of sense because it looks like he's kind of dealing with an injury. But more Ron Holland minutes makes a lot of sense. He goes in there and he just gums up stuff on defense. He's athletic enough to recover against a pretty slow and unathletic Cleveland team. And those kind of like moments where he has that impact, it just swings momentum, especially against a team like the Cavs that is unable to sustain momentum. A guy like Ron Holland can quickly take it away and have it going the other way.
And Mike, we know how important like Asar is in this series. Right. And like that was a thing. You saw Asar Thompson pick up 3 first half fouls last night. A couple of them were kind of, I don't know. I thought they were
kind of iffy.
Yeah, they were iffy. But like you saw him pick up 3 first half fouls. And then what happens? Ron Holland comes in. James Harden has more turnovers than he makes 1 field goal for the rest of the half. So like there's not a big defensive drop off when you're getting Ron Holland on the court. And I think, again, it's just one of those things where, like, if you're Cleveland, you're looking at it and you're saying all the things that we saw in game 1 that we needed to do better, we did do better in game 2. They made up the personal foul margin. They made up the free throw margin. They made up the turnover margin. They got Asar Thompson off the floor. They got Danis Jenkins off the floor in the fourth quarter. Because remember, Asar couldn't play in the fourth quarter of game 1. They got Danis Jenkins off. Well, Asar played the fourth quarter of game 2. and it was totally fine. So it's like if the Cavs try and slow things down, the Pistons have an answer for that. They can just throw Daniel Jenkins out there. If they speed things up in the fourth quarter like they were, then that's no problem either, because that's what Asar Thompson is going to play into. And even if you get him in foul trouble, guess what? Ron Holland's there too, and they can keep playing the exact same way for 48 minutes. So again, you're totally right, Aaron. There's a lot of basketball left to play, but if I'm a Cleveland fan, I'm looking at this team through 2 games, and I'm saying, what is the answer other than make more shots, play better?
That is the answer.
Really? Like, what is the answer? Do you see anything differently, Aaron?
I don't. And I kind of wanted to talk about why I feel like Detroit has not dominated per se, but won this series so far. And it's very clear that it's on the offensive end, they are able to play a much more free brand of basketball than they were against the Orlando Magic. Orlando did a really good job of buttoning up Detroit's role players, taking guys out of games. They took Duncan Robinson out of the series for the most part. They took Jalen Duren out of the series for the most part. And it was going to take masterpieces from Cade Cunningham to win then those games. And the Pistons got him. Cade Cunningham delivered because he is a superstar of superstars. But in this series, the story has been different. Not that Cade has been ineffective or inefficient. That's not been the case. But he's not having to score 38, 45, 42 like he had to against Orlando. The Cavs are not making Cade beat them, and they're also letting Detroit's role players feast. I mean, Duncan Robinson this series, and I know, Jasper, you mentioned this earlier, but made 5 threes in game 2. He is running around freely. He is spacing the court. He is giving them what they need in terms of just some of that extra setup, spot-up shooting offense. Daniel Jenkins having a really strong series. I know not peak efficiency, right? 14 points on 14 shots isn't good, but Daniel Jenkins can actually handle the basketball this series because the Cavs are not putting that pressure on him like a Jalen Suggs or Anthony Black was in the first round, where Daniel Jenkins was a little bit more cautious putting the ball on the floor and dribbling, or he was rushing himself. He's playing at a much better pace. He's more confident with the ball right now, and he's getting very clean looks for the Pistons. I mean, Karis LeVert, 8 points in 13 minutes last night. Not going to lie, I very much chuckled when Karis LeVert made that 1-3, and then on the next possession, got the ball up top, cleared everyone out, and tried to ISO for himself and took a horrible mid-range jumper. That's the Karis LeVert experience. I mean, Tobias Harris, 7 straight games of 20 plus points in the playoffs. He has been absolutely phenomenal. I could talk about Tobias Harris for 40 minutes, what he has brought to this team, what he has meant to this Pistons organization, the level of professionalism that he's brought to this franchise. He's been absolutely spectacular. He has completely remolded, the outside viewpoint of him with how he's played so far with the Detroit Pistons. He's been spectacular. The Pistons are not going to win this series because Cade Cunningham went into hero mode. They're winning this series because the sum of their parts are playing better than the sum of the Cleveland Cavaliers parts, and Cade Cunningham is not being burdened with having to save them. And I think that that's really spectacular. It's giving another element to Detroit. It's boosting these guys' confidence, and it makes you more confident from the outside as you look at this playoff series continue. When you see Duncan Robinson get involved in knockdown shots, when you see Daniel Jenkins comfortable making plays with the ball in his hands, hitting 3-pointers when he's called upon, hey, even Ron Holland, he didn't play in the first series all that much. He's getting his number called upon. It's not been perfect, but he's had some good moments. All that stuff kind of matters. And it's also from the standpoint of, hey, we're not putting all that wear and tear on Cade of go ISO here for the final 12 minutes of this game all by yourself. Other people are involved. Other people are making this possible. And that's a really encouraging sign from the Detroit Pistons POV.
Aaron, I'll say this, like it's just as important as the offense has been for Danis. The fact that he and Ron Holland are able to stay on the floor defensively is just as crucial. And like you're talking about a Cleveland team that coming into this, everybody assumed it's style versus style, right? Cleveland's got this great offense. Detroit's got this great defense. Well, Cleveland's offense is averaging 99 points through 2 games. And I'll say this, like you gave Tobias Harris a lot of credit. I will too. Mike, Aaron, have you seen a single offensive action that the Cavaliers have ran in this series so far that looks better or more consistent or more dangerous than a Tobias Harris post up? I haven't. The Cavs could run 7 different plays at the end of every game, and the Pistons could just give 7 straight post-ups to Tobias Harris. I will take the Pistons over the Cavs in those 7 possessions. I will. I just don't. There's just such a difference in the ability of both of these teams to match up physically. There are so many guys for Cleveland that have no business playing in this series that have to play in order for them to do anything that they're trying to do. And everybody for Detroit is just like, it doesn't matter who you're putting in there. It does not matter. They're going to be able to figure something out.
Yep. I could talk for another 2 hours about how the Cavs are in big trouble and it's all pretty much self-inflicted wounds. But guys, any last thoughts before we head into games 3 and 4? Because I mean, the series might be over the next time we have a podcast.
I want to turn it back to you on this one, Mike. Is it over? I mean, how do you feel? Is this over?
It doesn't really look or feel good. I would not. They have about as high of a ceiling on paper as anybody in the East. They will never hit that ceiling because they are just incapable of getting out of their own way and meeting other teams energy-wise to make that happen. So I don't really feel good about it. I'm on the record of picking Pistons in 5 to my cohorts in the Fear the Sword group of writers. And some people said that was too short. I don't think it is. I think that they'll win game 3. And if they don't win game 3, I feel even more confident that they do win game 4 as like a gentleman sweep type of deal. But it seems like it's over for me. I mean, unless James Harden becomes way better. I just don't see that happening. And I don't see Kenny Atkinson making the changes necessary to put the team in position to win. So I would say by the next time we have a pod, this series is over.
Yeah, it doesn't look good right now.
It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
And if they don't win game 3, granted, I think if there's a game they win, it is game 3. I agree. I think this is a gentleman's sweep situation.
Yeah,
I think the Pistons are their confidence is higher than it's ever been. They are focused. They are not even playing their best basketball and are still beating Cleveland by double digits. It just feels like they're in a groove right now. They have settled themselves in ever since going down to Orlando in the playoffs, and they're kind of back to that where they were in the regular season when they were just cruising. And it's like, hey, we're not playing great, but we're still winning games. It feels like that's where we're at here in the playoffs. Pistons are still not playing great by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
And they're still very cleanly winning these games. And that gives me the confidence to say that this is going to wrap itself up sooner rather than later. And Cleveland's last-ditch effort to extend this is on Saturday. And if they don't, it's going to be over in 4. I think it'll be over in 5.
I'm just going to leave it at this. Everybody listening, say the words out loud with me. The Cleveland Cavaliers traded for James Harden midseason and then overcame a 2-0 deficit to the number 1 team to make the Eastern Conference Finals and then beat the Knicks to go to the finals.
And then I wake up.
Yeah, you just say that out loud to yourself and tell me how good that sounds from everything you know about basketball. You can't turn a hoe into a housewife, guys. I mean,
thank you for ending on a good note, Jasper.
That you are what you are. You are what you are, and the Pistons are what they are. Just say those words out loud to yourself and go, "Yeah, I feel good about that statement."
Feasible, right? Yes.
If you feel good about it, you feel good about it. I've said those words out loud. I know how I feel. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, much like the series between the Cavs and the Pistons, which might be a wrap, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, and that is FanDuel. Of course, they've been a very loyal sponsor for this episode, and they will be for hopefully a lot more episodes because there's a lot more games to bet on, and there might not be a whole lot more Pistons and Cavs games to bet on, at least not until next year. So for my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson, I'm Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. We will see you all